I'm Carrie from Lovely Etc. and I am going to show you how to stencil wood and get perfect stencil lines every time. It's the easiest way to make signs and lots of other decor, so let's get started. So here's what you need. You need something to stencil. I have an old cutting board actually. I got it from a thrift store. I just kind of like it. It has a nice patina and it was only $1, and so that's what I'm stenciling. Again, any kind of wood's going to work. You need a stencil. This is my stencil. I'll put a link to it in the description. It's a reusable stencil. You can also get vinyl stencils from Etsy that are one-time use, or lots of other reusable stencils from Etsy and other places too, but that's one of my favorite sources. You need either repositionable spray adhesive or painter's tape. Either one will work, but the spray adhesive really helps with getting perfect stencil lines. You need some paint. You can use pretty much any paint, but something with a flatter sheen is going to be best. I really like to just use these little super inexpensive acrylic paints you can get from craft stores. They're really cheap. There's tons and tons of colors and they work great. You need a paper plate or a painter's palette if you have that, but this is what you're going to put your paint on. And the secret, one of the secrets to getting really perfect stenciling is you're not going to use a roller, you're not going to use a brush. Those have their place, especially if you're stenciling like a whole wall or floor. But if you're just stenciling something small and you want it to be absolutely perfect, what you need are these makeup wedges. These are little sponges that you apply makeup with. It's like $1 for 50 at Target. Maybe it's not quite that cheap, but pretty close. And they are the perfect thing for stenciling. Whatever wood you choose to use to stencil on, the smoother it is, the better results you're going to get. You want your stencil to be on something really smooth. You can stencil rough wood if you're going for something rustic, but it's going to be really difficult to get perfect lines because the stencil will not be able to lay perfectly flat on the wood because it's rough. So there's going to be little holes and dips and valleys under the stencil, and that's where paint is going to want to go. So the smoother, the better. Okay, get your surface. If it's dirty or something, clean it up, but in general, just take your surface. You can sand it to make it smoother if you need to. Take your stencil. If you're just going to use painter's tape, you just take a few pieces and tape it into place. The reason that I prefer the repositionable spray adhesive is because with painter's tape, say you put a piece here and a piece there, the stencil is going to stay in place on the wood. It's not going to be moving all around. But when you use the spray adhesive, the adhesive is all over the entire thing, so the entire thing is stuck down to the wood, which means all these little parts in between each letter are also firmly adhered to the wood. And it just means that it's a lot harder for paint to make its little way under the stencil where you do not want it. When you spray the spray adhesive, you should be in a well-ventilated area, but also you want to make sure you spray it over some newspaper, if anybody has that, or an old poster board or wrapping paper. Something, anything that will catch the excess, because anything this little spray lands on is going to be sticky and not what you want for your house. So I have an old poster board over here. I'm going to spray it over. Place your stencil on your surface and make sure you line it up exactly how you want it. So if it needs to be centered, make sure it's centered. If it needs to be straight, especially for words, make sure that it is straight. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect, but try to get it as good as you can. And then you're just going to press it into place, especially if you used the spray adhesive. If you didn't, you're just going to set it on and use a couple pieces of painter's tape to hold it in place exactly where you want it. Okay, so get your paint and pour a little bit onto your plate. And you're just going to use your makeup sponge. Get some on the end, but you don't want a lot of paint. So once you've dipped your makeup sponge into the paint, you're gonna blot most of it off. If you're using a paper plate for your palette, just blot it off right on the plate until there's just a very thin amount of paint left on your sponge. And then you're just gonna start painting. When you paint, you're just doing an up and down motion to get the paint into the stenciled area. lightly pressing it. You do not want to push down really hard because that will cause paint to squish under the stencil, which is exactly what we don't want. When it seems like maybe the paint's getting a little light, just get some more paint on there and keep going. You may need to do a second coat of paint, especially if you're stenciling with white paint onto dark wood. Okay, so it looks pretty good. There is one more trick that you can try if you want your sign or whatever it is that you're stenciling to look more hand painted and less stenciled. The little marks in between the different stencil sections are a dead giveaway that you stenciled. Now, I have no problem with something being stenciled. I think it can look really beautiful still. However, if that's not the look that you want for your particular project, there is a easy method that I use to get rid of those little spaces in between the letters. Okay, so I use a simple toothpick and dip it in the paint, and then basically use it like a tiny paintbrush to get rid of the spaces. You could also use a really small paintbrush, but I find that a toothpick is really easy to control, and also it doesn't hold too much paint, so it just blends in better with the design that's already been stenciled. There is one more trick you can use if you're still struggling to get really clean lines with your stencil. After you put your stencil onto your wood, before you do any painting, use some Mod Podge. So Mod Podge is mostly used for decoupage, but it is also a sealer, a glue, a finish. It does all kinds of stuff, and it's clear. So when you paint a little Mod Podge over your stencil before painting, it creates a seal along all of the edges of your stencil. And also, if there's any little air bubbles under your stencil where maybe the wood's a little rough or it's just not laying really flat, the Mod Podge is going to seep in there underneath the stencil and seal it up, which is a lot better than if your paint seeps under there, because Mod Podge is clear, you're not going to see it, and the paint would be a mess. So if you decide to try that, make sure you pay attention to what kind of Mod Podge you have as far as whether it's shiny or not. It comes in matte, satin, and gloss, I believe. So if you're stenciling on furniture that already has kind of a glossy finish, you want to use gloss. If you're stenciling on something that's matte, use matte, and if it's more satin, use satin. If you're not really sure, in general, I like the matte Mod Podge the best for just basically anything. So that's another tip you can try if you are having trouble still. Okay, hopefully that helps you next time you're trying to stencil to get some of those clean lines. I know for me, I'm a perfectionist, and so every tiny little imperfection drives me crazy, but with those tips, I've been able to get my projects looking really good and as perfect as possible. Thanks for joining me. I'd love for you to subscribe to my channel, Lovely Etc., where I share inexpensive DIY projects to create a home you love.